Coming up on this episode of Nintendo Cartridge Society, it's Octopath Traveler.
Wait, Patrick, don't you mean Octopath Traveler?
What have I been playing? It's dangerous to go alone, so the Nintendo Cartridge Society goes with you. Welcome to Nintendo Cartridge Society. My name is Patrick Ellers. I am joined, as always, by my co-host, Mark Mitchell. Mark, how's it going?
Feeling good, feeling great.
Good and great. Look, we've got a fun topic today, right? We're going to be talking about Octopath Traveler, newly out on the Switch. We've both put a little bit of time into it, and we've got some impressions. Mark, would you say this is our review of the game?
No.
No, I would not say that, because dig it. I think I'll end up playing this game for 80 hours.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what I haven't had of free time since this game came out.
80 hours?
80 hours, for sure. So I wonder if maybe we'll revisit it in the future.
I'm sure in the what we've been playing, it'll come up.
For sure, 100%. But before we get into our discussion, we've got some business to attend to. First, top 8 RPGs on Nintendo platforms.
How timely, as we're talking about Octopath Traveler today, that we would mention the top 8 RPGs.
Mark, you're giving the game away. Everyone will know what we're doing and what we've been planning. So we're going to make a list of the top 8 RPGs that have appeared on Nintendo platforms. And look, we've played a lot of RPGs.
But we have not played every RPG on a Nintendo platform ever. We've probably not even played all the good ones.
We probably haven't played half of the good ones.
Maybe an 8th.
Maybe an eighth. How many Dragon Warrior games have you played? Dragon Quest games. What's the real name?
Dragon Quest. And on Nintendo platforms, I have
there we go.
played 4.
Okay.
If we're counting Dragon Quest 7, which I picked up for the 3DS and still have never actually
famously barely played.
Yes.
I think just one for me. Just the very first one. So look, we need your help. If you can already tell that we're leaving some of your favorite games off of this list, you need to email us at nintendocartridgesociety@gmail.com and tell us what we absolutely need to include.
And you should do it as soon as possible, because we're going to be recording the episode late July for release in the first week of August.
Yeah, so that's coming up very soon. So get those in. Thanks to everyone who's contributed already. We've got a lot of varied opinions and a lot of people putting Super Mario RPG on there out of obligation. So
that's fine. We will too, I'm sure.
I will put it on there by passion.
Yeah, whatever.
And I will fight for it. All right. And then, Mark, we've got some other news. And of course, that sound can only mean that my copy of Sonic Forces has finally returned to us.
The prodigal son.
For those of you who are maybe newer to the podcast, we went through a period of... I bought Sonic Forces when it came out on the Switch. And I played it for an evening, maybe a Saturday morning or something. And then quickly realized this game was not going to be fun for me to play. But it might be fun to lend out to our listeners. So we instated this program whereby we would lend it to anyone who wrote in with their address, and I would mail it to them with a return envelope. They could send it back at no cost to them.
It went missing for a while.
We thought
the borrowing program was over.
Right, and I had emotionally prepared myself for that. I said someone's going to rip me off someday.
Yes, and it had been a few weeks. Months maybe since we had heard anything.
Tons of I think I sent this out just before Christmas,
but we never gave up hope. It's candle on the water.
And it came home to us. The last person who had this, okay, so I guess it wasn't Christmas, it was early or mid-January that it went out, and it's just come back to us now. But so anyway, we have to decide. We have an existing list of people who were interested in borrowing this back in January or before when they got their names on the list. Should we just move on to the next person on the list, or should we open the list fresh, anew?
I feel like we've got to
honor the list.
We've got to honor the list.
Okay.
But
yes,
we should definitely open the list anew.
Absolutely. So here's what's going to happen. If you would like to borrow my copy of Sonic Forces and you've already asked for it, I'm going to go through and like start emailing people and be like, hey, do you still want this thing? And I will send it to you, and it'll be in an envelope with another envelope that'll have my address on it. And it'll just come back to me. I pay for all of it. Yes. And if you are not already on that list, you should email us at Nintendo Cartridge Society at gmail.com. And I just need your physical address, and I will mail it to you, and that'll be the end of that. We ask nothing else of you other than to play it, or not, I guess. You can just have it in your home for a while and then return it. Literally the only thing we ask of you.
What a day.
What a day. I cannot believe this thing has... You said we didn't lose faith. I'll admit that I lost faith.
I believed in our listeners.
You did? That's beautiful. Okay, Mark, we're off on a good foot here. Let's get into our discussion of Octopath Traveler. Octopath Traveler, the Square-Enix RPG that came out just earlier this month, a week ago, I guess.
The biggest third-party release, Switch exclusive.
Outside of Mario Rabbids, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Also kind of an RPG. That's interesting.
Oh, Mario Rabbids?
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. You were thinking that I was saying that this game was kind of an RPG?
Yeah. I was like, oh, this is going to be a more interesting discussion than I anticipated. Not that our discussions aren't always fascinating.
Right, but Mark just finally woke up for the first time ever on this show. So where do you want to start? First, are you enjoying the game? Let's back up one.
Okay, all right.
I don't want to know if you like it yet.
All right.
How far into the game are you?
So I'm around 10 hours.
Okay.
Maybe like button up on 11.
Okay, so I am probably an hour behind you then.
I mean, that doesn't really tell us anything about our progress.
Right.
Specifically.
Right, because the way the game is structured, it features 8 main characters, and you select one to, they're like your sort of anchor character, and then you play through their like initial chapter, their first adventure, and then you sort of end up experiencing everyone else's first adventures before moving on to the like second chapters in all these stories.
Yes, and not to get super sidetracked, but presumably you don't have to pick up any other characters if you don't want to. So, like, you don't have to add them to your party.
Right. The game does seem pretty wide open in that regard. But I also have no idea how you would actually accomplish that.
Or like why you would necessarily want to.
Yeah, I mean, unless you were like setting yourself a goal of like, this is my Ulbrich playthrough, and Ulbrich rides alone. He doesn't need anybody. But obviously he does. Like the game is so built around like needing to attack in different ways and having different resources with you at all times that like it would really hamper your ability to get through any battle without a ton of different characters to choose from. Okay, how many of the characters have you collected at this point in the game?
5. I think I've picked up 5.
Okay, I have also picked up 5. And I just finished the Scholars. I just finished his boss fight. What's his name?
Cyrus?
Cyrus, yes. I just did Cyrus's boss fight.
So who did you start with? Who was your like starting character?
So I in playing demos before, had done Primrose and Ulbrich's sort of openings, and so I was like, I wanna leave this one up to chance. So I rolled a D8, and then I picked Alphen, the apothecary. Who did you start?
So I started with Therion. I don't know. Therion.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So I started as Therion. So I haven't played, or I haven't gotten in this playthrough to Primrose or Ulbrich yet.
Oh man.
And so I'm wondering, is like that initial demo, is that actually like the
It's pretty
Is
close.
it their story?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's pretty close.
So like the Primrose's like boss fight and everything is the one that we saw in that initial demo.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
So yeah, and I mean, it's just the beginnings of these games can actually be, or the first chapters, you can plow through them pretty quickly, especially once you aren't. I mean, when you're the very first one that you have to do all of it. And then like for the second one, it sort of offers you to be like, hey, do you really want to see like the beginning here, or do you want to just like jump in where like the rubber meets the road?
And initially I was like, yeah, I want to see it all. Give it to me, baby. And then like three characters in, I was like, no, thank you. Skip. I have been skipping a lot of story.
Yeah. I have also started doing that. I enjoyed, so the order that I played, I started with Alphen, and then I was just traveling around and realized that I was at Sandstone, Sand, whatever, Primrose's place. And I was like, ooh, I like this story. So I did that all. And then like Ulbrich is right next to her, so I collected him. And then like by the time I got onto the fourth one, I was still watching the whole story, but that's when I was like, maybe I don't need to.
Yeah, so I started with Therian, and then I've gone like clockwise kind of. So then I picked up, I think, the merchant, what's her name? Tressa.
Yeah.
And then like jumped back to Therian's starting place and then like went down to get
Alphen, yeah.
So yeah, that like bottom part I haven't done yet.
Yeah, and that's Primrose and Ulbrich, like right there along the bottom.
Yeah. But no, so I guess like one aspect that I am not super into is the stories. I don't find the characters very interesting, and I think like their stories themselves, for the most part, are like, I don't need to watch every cutscene play out in order to get it.
Yeah,
because a lot of them are just kind of like by the numbers, and so you're like, oh, okay, all right, like I can see the beginning of this scene and I know how it's going to play out. Let me just like skip it.
Well, and so I do like the characters and I do like the story. I'm not enamored with how it's actually executed. It's just so chatty.
This sounds really snarky, but like, what do you like about the characters? Because I don't feel like they have very much personality.
So I started with Alphen. And if you didn't watch the beginning of Alphen's story, maybe some of it, you don't see as much of. But so Alphen is the apothecary who appears to have no family in this town that he lives in. But it has a close relationship with the other apothecary and his sister. And his whole thing is like he and his apothecary bro are like apothecary bros. And I didn't expect to start this game with a ship, but I've got one, and it's those two. It's Alf and Zeph. I just want them to be happy together and recognize their love for each other. So I guess that's what for me, like I saw a connection between those two characters.
Headcanon is what is like making the game interesting. That's totally fine.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, headcanon is just how you're reading characters, right? Like how you respond to them. So like, I like that, and I think Primrose's story is like interesting in like maybe an overly dark kind of way. Yeah, I mean, there are some of the stories that feel a little bit more, I don't know, like light at this point. Like Tressa's, for example, she's a merchant, and like her parents run a store, and then one day she like meets a charming pirate, and she was like a real good merchant around him. And you're like, what am I watching?
That's interesting because like Tressa's was actually one of the more enjoyable to me because it was the first that I'd encountered that was kind of like lighthearted. I mean, I guess I'm a little bit surprised at how like dour the game is. It's very somber.
Sure. And like I think you can get that from just like the color palette. We've talked about this leading up to Octopath, that like we like the look of the game, but maybe the color palette is a little bit more, it seems almost like industrial and like kind of washed out, and like there's a perpetual like weight of the world on these characters, and that's expressed visually through the color palette of the game.
One thing that I so far, again, I'm only like 11 hours in,
Hmm.
is that there doesn't seem to be any uh, this early in the game, there's no overarching narrative. There's no
Yes.
like singular bad guy that you are like uh eventually like making your way towards. And I actually like that a lot.
Yeah. It
Um
makes it way different from like a Final Fantasy game.
totally different.
Because I don't think the world is going to end in this. I don't. I
Right.
don't think the world is in any danger. Even like the kingdom, I don't know of like an army that's like going to invade or like any kind of existential threat. It's just like this guy wants to. I mean, like Alphen when he leaves his village, the next step on his journey is he wants to help people. Like I don't know. It's so like pure and innocent that like the story feels wide open to
The
me.
stakes are very personal for
Yes.
each character, and I know that some people who've been playing aren't enjoying the fact that the characters don't really interact that much, and the characters like their stories, like again at this point, don't really intertwine. But it doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
Like I'm fine with it being that you're in a party, but everybody has their like own individual story. Part of the reason I like that is because it makes the game very like I can like I can pick up and play for a little bit. I can put it down.
Yeah.
It's very like episodic. It's like, okay, I have like accomplished this part of this person's story,
Yeah.
and that's enough.
Yeah. Because like like I said, you can probably knock that out in like 45 minutes, depending how tough the boss fight is. Some of these boss fights I've been in for like half an hour, but we'll get to the combat in a bit. But I totally agree that it feels way more digestible right now. And I do think, and I suspect that as we get into chapters 2 and 3, and however far deep this game goes, that we will see more crossover. And I would imagine that there are some chapter 2s or chapter 3s, whatever, that are for multiple characters that like their lives intertwine. Because there are, I don't know if you've noticed a thread of a like wandering stranger through some of the characters' pasts. There is a wandering stranger that did some medicine, and he's the one that inspired Alphen. And then there was another one that a sort of like stranger appeared in the history of. And so I think there are threads between the characters that at this stage of the game, 10 hours in, we're not able to tie together yet.
Yeah, and that seems totally fair in like a 40-hour experience, however long it ends up being. That we've only seen like the first like quarter of what the game has to offer.
Yeah. So okay, story as we've encountered it so far. I think we've established like what our kind of feelings are on that.
Well, so one of the things that with any like throwback title
Hmm.
is they're trying to recapture some of the our fond memories of the past, but also sometimes when developers are doing that, they fall into the traps of repeating the mistakes of the past.
Sure.
How have you found like Octopath to scratch that itch for like a old school 16-bit RPG game that we both love?
I think it does a really good job of it. One of the it's interesting because like the one of the qualities of those old RPGs is that sort of a grand epic story that doesn't make any sense. And this is bucking that trend entirely. But like I love the character designs. I think everyone looks really cool. I think all the sprites are great. I love. Have you encountered any of the second job stuff?
No, not yet.
So there are ways to there are items that you can get that you can equip second classes to all of your characters, and it changes their sprites a little bit. And like so I got the thing that I can add warrior class to any one of my characters, and I one by one put it on all of them just so I could see them in like the blue tunic like Ulbrich wears. So like that's when I know that I'm just responding to it on a very like the same sort of way that I love the Final Fantasy VI characters or Final Fantasy IV. Like I don't love the portraits of those characters that are drawn by legendary Final Fantasy artists. I love the 16-bit sprites, and I would say that my affection for these characters, it feels like it comes from the same place. That I love the abstraction of these characters in pixels. What about you? Do you think it's scratching that 16-bit RPG itch for you?
I was worried about the random battles, like the
Yeah.
random encounters, because I feel like that is not necessarily a mechanic that has aged well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I'm surprised at how little it's bothering me.
Well, I will agree with that. Um, wh- I do find myself occasionally bothered when I pop out of a fight and I'm like, okay, now where was I going? Like I still have that. That's one of the things that always bothered me in like a Final Fantasy game. Um, but I think for me, the reason that the random encounters don't bother me is that I like every fight I get into. I have fun with every fight.
Yeah, I am surprised at how much I'm enjoying the battle mechanics.
Do we want to talk about those for a little bit? So the battle mechanics are pretty simple, right? It's menu based combat, and you can see like a little timeline of all the characters on the top of the screen. Like Final Fantasy X or whatever. Um, and you have all the time in the world to make decisions. It is not an active time battle situation. And there are, I guess, two kind of unique mechanics in this game. One is that all enemies have a certain number of weaknesses and a like an armor value. So like if you can see that one of their weaknesses is getting hit with an axe and they have an armor value of 2, if you hit them with an axe twice, you've broken their armor and then they're stunned for a turn and they take more damage during that time. So like the whole game for me at least has been built around getting the opportunities to break them as frequently as possible. Is that basically how you?
And when you have multiple enemies, it's all just kind
Mhm.
of like strategizing. Oh, do you want to try to break every enemy? Do you want to break an enemy and then like tank it down
Yeah,
before moving on? Like there's lots of different ways that you can approach this, and occasionally you'll run into bosses or enemies where the game like forces you to change your strategy.
yeah, absolutely, and introduce a weakness type that you don't have the ability to throw at them, a bunch. And this kind of feeds into the other unique battle mechanic, which are battle points. Every turn you gain one battle point, and at any point you can spend up to 3 battle points to give yourself basically extra attacks or to power up your magic spells or whatever. So like in the example of I need to hit a guy with an axe 4 times to knock down his armor, you can wait until your axe wielder has 3 battle points, spend them all, and then in one turn take out his armor. But it can also mean that like you are sort of strategizing when to break armor. So you're like, oh, if I wait one more turn, like I could break his armor now, but if I wait one more turn, everyone will have had one more battle point, and then when I break it, everyone can just wail on him with a lowered defense. So like I love thinking about all this stuff and like figuring out the ways to put it all together.
It seems like there are so many variables, but the game feels very well balanced.
Yeah, well, I mean, and that's another thing is that as you're playing through all of these first chapters of all these characters' journeys, it scales with your characters. So like, um, and then maybe it caps out at when you get 4 characters, then for the rest of those first chapters, it's all sort of at the same level. But the very first um, like 4 character boss that I fought, it was Tressa's boss, was real tough because the characters, she's a pretty low level when you first get there, and the rest of them are, maybe at like 15 or 16 or something. And that's
Well, I mean, I guess it depends on
it
what order you
depends on
do it.
right. Well, I'm saying for whoever your fourth
Oh,
is
sure.
the very first time that you have 4 characters in your party, because that's a pretty big advantage, right? To have 4 characters. So I think that's how it scales. Um, so like that ends up being like a pretty tough involved boss fight. And not having just done my 5th, it felt much easier because my guys have leveled up since then. I think that's just sort of where it tops that off.
Uh, Speaking of like the kind of like things that are bothersome in old school RPGs that I think this game has done a good job of like reducing the friction on is I love that there's a optimize armor, or what do you like, optimize equipment.
Yeah, sure.
So for like each character, it does, I think, a pretty solid job of just being like, yeah, here's the stuff that is basically like has the
right.
best stats.
Here's what you mean. Yeah, well, and I like a lot, and these are sort of most RPGs have this sort of quality of life thing. But when you are buying an item, you can automatically see who uses it and how it increases their stats. Improved stats are in blue.
And after you buy it, you can immediately equip it.
Yeah, the language is even like equip right away. And you're like, yes, thank you. It's still a little bit of a like I wish some RPG, and I'm sure one of them has, but it's just like you just upgraded from this weapon to this weapon. Do you want to sell the old one? That would be so nice.
Yeah, that would be really nice.
Yeah. What other little like quality of life things does this have over like old school RPGs?
I don't mind that you don't actually have to walk into the shop. That you just like do that interaction at the door.
Yeah, that's nice. I like that. Oh, I just had one. Now it's gone. Mark, it has flitted away from me, and I'll never remember it. We'll never know.
Maybe it'll be like Sonic Forces, and it'll return to you at some point.
It has returned to me. If you ever get into a like long conversation that you don't want to watch, and you start like getting kind of lazy or like nervous and like fiddling with the sticks, the game's like, oh, you can just hold B.
Oh yeah, any
this.
button. If you're just like fiddling,
yeah,
it's like, do you want to get out of here? Like, do you want to push B? Because you totally can.
Are you bored? And also, like when you are about to start someone's first chapter, the game is very like, okay, you sure you want to do this now? You're gonna be stuck here for a little bit,
right? And if you don't want to, like, here's some general information about this character, so you at least get the gist of what they're about.
Yeah, I mean, for as chatty as the game is, it does more or less seem to respect your time, right? Like if you want to not do something, you don't really have to watch it.
And that's what I want from every game.
Yeah.
Is one that's like, oh yeah, if I want to dive into this story, or if like I care about this character specifically, that is available to me. Mm-hmm. And if I just want to, the game isn't like skip it, I can't. The game is at no point like, no, you have to watch this.
This is an important part.
Except
watch
for the very first part.
Yeah.
The very first character you choose, which makes sense because it's an intro to the world.
Mm-hmm. And even that, you could hold B to like skip each of the like cutscenes if you really wanted
to. One thing that I feel like, at least in these early stages, I am interested to see how it plays out, because side quests at this point I haven't really continued to do a lot of them because they don't feel very rewarding in this early going.
Right. Well, for the most part, they have the following structure. Meet a person who has a speech bubble above their head that is orange. Talk to them. Use one of the path. What are they called? Path abilities.
Yeah.
And solve their problem or get them out of the way or something.
Or like find out information about them.
Yeah, and then that's it. So they're not super involved stories, at least to this point. Some of them do have like a number 1 next to them. So like maybe if you start, this is now just hypothesizing about a game that exists, so apologies if this is stupid. But they'll be like, oh, here's a Marina's mom 1, and it's like, oh, so maybe she'll come back later in some capacity, but only if you've done the first chapter in her story.
I totally forgot what I was gonna say.
Great. I like how do you feel about the leveling up system and like gaining jobs or using not jobs,
like
gaining
skills and things?
Yeah,
I think it all works really great. I like that there's like the passive skills that you earn, and that those just happen like after you've picked 4 or 5. So, or 6 or 7, right. Whatever. So you can choose like the skills that are most important to you, and you'll still unlock the passive skills in the same order. Again, I think the whole game feels very like thoughtfully balanced.
Mm-hmm. Well, and so this game is from the team that did Bravely Default and Bravely Second, which are RPGs on the 3DS that have a similar like job system to their characters. I have recently found the thing that lets me add a second job to the characters of Warrior, and then that whole Warrior skill tree is just there. So like if I want Alphen to start learning the Warrior skills that Ulbrich already has, he can just do it, and like that it kind of starts over from like okay, you can spend 30 job points to get any of the and they're all there. Like it's not like some of it is gated behind being Ulbrich. Um, so I don't know how many like second jobs people can have over time, but it seems like the room for growth for all of these characters is huge, and like by the end they could all be weird little mishmashes of whatever, whatever conglomeration of jobs you want them to have, which is cool. It means they're like way customizable.
One of the things that I like about the game is the music.
Mm-hmm.
The music's been getting a lot of praise. The only thing I feel like sometimes the music's like incongruous with
You
the
had mentioned this
action
before.
itself.
So do you have an example of when the action
Not like
doesn't feel
specifically,
right?
but I feel like sometimes during those like story cutscenes,
Mm-hmm.
the music, which is just like general overworld music, no longer fits like what is happening.
Sure.
And I think that's like one of those holdovers from like being a retro throwback RPG, whereas now we kind of expect games to be more cinematic in that way, where it's like, oh, the music is going to ebb and flow depending on the action. And I
Sure.
don't feel like that's the case here.
Yeah, like those specific moments aren't scored the same way that like it's being scored as a video game. Yeah, I would agree with that. I would also say that for as much as I like the music, it has the remember when you and I were playing Final Fantasy on the NES Classic, and we were like, oh, it's the music is charming, and it was fun for like, I don't know, an hour of like listening to the music, but then you realize you're walking through the same area, hearing the same ba dun 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 over and over again, and the same battle music and the same victory music. Um, that like it's repetitive out of necessity, right? Like these games are grindy. And so I do start to feel that after not that long, especially if I do get in the mode where I just like I'm walking to a town that's far away, or I do want to grind a little bit. Um, so like I usually, if I'm like playing a chapter of a character, I'm listening and everything is, music's up and everything. But there are times when I'm doing this that I put on a podcast or put on other music, even though I sort of like it.
Yeah, I have found that I feel like I usually don't have a lot of tolerance for just like really repetitive um middle of the road video game music.
Yeah.
But for some reason this hasn't bothered me. Like I really like the um what would you go like the battle theme,
Yeah.
and I like that the battle theme like changes depending on what area you're in. Or
Yeah.
at least I can think of like the merchant, like that like pirate one
Yeah.
was a
It's
little
got
bit
a little bit
different.
more of a nautical theme
I
to it.
like the like victory theme.
Mm-hmm.
Um so yeah, I don't know. For some reason, it hasn't bothered me in the same way.
The repetition. Yeah. Well, and I mean, I do not mean to slag on the music at all because I do think it's good. And I like it. What on just on the subject of like audio, acting. There's a lot of voiceover in this game.
Oh, I have turned it to Japanese, because I did not care for the English voice acting, and at that point, it's like I don't speak Japanese. I don't understand Japanese at all,
Yeah.
and so it's just becomes like white noise
Yeah.
almost at that point.
Um, the this when the scenes become voice acted, because it's everything is text on screen, and then if it's a more like story heavy moment, they will have actors reading these parts, acting these parts. Um, and when I get to those scenes, I find myself skipping through the lines faster
Oh,
because like
sure,
they
yeah.
start talking, and I'm like, I got it. And I don't know if that's meant to be like a stylistic choice of uh I I don't know, for my money, the RPGs that I played that have this sort of aesthetic or feel like this predate having voiceover in
For
them.
sure.
So like I mean, I guess the very first time I remember seeing that in a role playing game is like Final Fantasy X, and like that voiceover sucks, right? Like I don't ever want to hear like Titus and the rest of them saying the garbage that they say. So yeah, I don't I should just turn the voice acting either to Japanese, or you can turn the volume on the voices all the way down if you want to. So maybe I should look into that. Okay. Mark, we've covered most of everything about this game, right?
Yeah.
At least what we've experienced so far. Do you think that by this time next week you will have played another 10 hours, or do you think you're going to slow down? Do you think you're just getting started? Like,
I think I'm just getting started. I think if I have the time, I would love to put another 10 hours into it, because sometimes when we're playing these games for the podcast, it's like, oh my gosh, I just gotta get through this game.
Right.
Even if I'm enjoying it enough, I really feel the pressure to just self-imposed pressure to try to get as far as I can. This one I'm really enjoying, and I'm happy taking it at a leisurely pace.
There's also something freeing about the size of it, where you're just like, well, there's no way I'm going to adequately experience this game before we talk about it on the show. So I'm just going to experience what I do experience and just kind of be relaxed about it.
But then also some of these games we'll pick up at it for the show, talk about it, and then it's like, I'm never coming back to this.
Yeah, that's true. I have not played Snake Pass since we talked about it.
But Octopath Traveler is a game where it's like, I'm looking forward to seeing what more it has to offer.
Yeah, me too. All right, great. Well, so those are our thoughts on Octopath Traveler. If you would like to share your thoughts with us, please email them. I know a lot of you are playing this game. We would love to hear about what your experience is. Nintendo Cartridge Society at gmail.com. And also keep in mind that we are playing this at a leisurely old man pace, old men with day jobs. So, don't spoil any late game stuff for us, right? Or spoil it.
Yeah, I don't really care.
Who cares? Okay, great. All right, Mark, let's close out the segment. And that is going to do it for this episode of Nintendo Cartridge Society. If you like the episode, please rate, review, subscribe, all that good stuff on Apple Podcasts. And while you're doing stuff with your computer or phone, you should follow Mark and I on Twitter. Mark is at MKE Mitchell. I'm at Patrick_Ellers. And the show collectively is at NinCart Society. And you can check out our Facebook page, which is just Nintendo Cartridge Society. Remember to get in your 8 top RPGs on Nintendo platforms, or send in your address so you can borrow our copy of Sonic Forces. It's back, and we're back, and we're doing it, Mark. We're living the dream. If you like Mark and mine's opinions, you can if you like our opinions, we write about comic books on retconpunch.com. Olivia Duncan made our logo. Our theme music is provided by 8-Bit Betty. You can get more of 8-Bit Betty's music by going to 8bitbetty.com or by listening right now. For my co-host, Mark Mitchell, this is Patrick Ellers saying sometimes it's okay to skip the beginning. And thanks for listening.
Hey, this is Betsy Stover.
And I'm Amanda Allen.
And we do a podcast called
Why Mommy Drinks.
Each episode we have a guest and we all share a story of a time that our kids drove us to drink.
Parenting isn't easy, but it sure can be funny.
Listen to us on Campfire Media.
Why Mommy Drinks.
Campfire.